Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined by Pat Fitzmaurice and Andrew Erickson on this Thursday morning ahead of Week 12. Fellas, we are talking starts and sits, and guys, we added on waivers this week, and we'll do some touchdown calls at the end of the show. It is our typical Thursday episode. Quick reminder for everybody that all of our weekly consensus rankings and tiers can be found at fantasypros.com/rankings. Erickson, we were just talking before we started recording about how some of our teams are finally kind of going by the way. I say finally, but we're kind of lightening the load a bit here as we get into Week 12 and teams are starting to get eliminated. How is your overall fantasy season going?
Not great. I mean, drafted Jaylen Waddle, so that's been basically a dead pick on all my different fantasy teams, so that's unfortunate. But if anything, my main takeaway is I need to be in less leagues moving forward because it doesn't let me cater my expertise and my nurturing towards enough teams because I have so many that I have to check and set lineups for. I can't make enough trades where if I had half those teams, I could nurture them a little bit more and get them up to an acceptable level. So that's something I'm trying to remind myself of because during the summertime, it's, I want to be in as many leagues as humanly possible. This is so much fun. And then when you do waivers on Tuesday and then I don't get to see my wife on Tuesday nights, it's very sad in the Erickson household. So I am trying to shift gears for next year. I got to leave a Post-it note up on my desk and says, hey, it's okay to say no to more leagues next year. Well,
you know what would help you is using the multi-league assistant.
I mean, I use it. Imagine if I didn't use it.
Yeah, imagine how much worse it would be. Fitz, how's your season treating you?
Better in redraft than dynasty. I actually wish that maybe there was a little bit of a slowdown with waivers and there were a few more teams I could let by the wayside. And I don't mean that as a humble brag, but like I've got a lot of, it's not that I've got a lot of 9-2 and 8-3 teams. I've got a lot of 6-5 teams right now where it's getting down to brass tacks here. But one thing that's helped with the waivers, I've started doing waivers on Tuesday morning, like first thing while I'm having morning coffee. It means a later start to the workday, but it's so nice to have that out of the way early in the day rather than sitting there at 11 p.m. at night and wishing I could go to bed. But I've still got to do waivers for 18 more teams.
It's really the waivers that's the problem, right? Like I don't mind like negotiating trades across multiple leagues and setting lineups across multiple leagues. It's the sitting down Tuesdays for waivers that is where it becomes overwhelming. So I don't know, maybe more best ball leagues next year and fewer leagues you have to actually do that for. I have one league where they don't do waivers at all. It's just always been like that. It's much more casual players, and they just, you wake up Tuesday, you can start picking up players. There's no waivers whatsoever. And I've grown to kind of appreciate it because I don't have to like set up a bunch of different claims. On the one hand, it's unfortunate if you get there late and somebody else beat you to it. So like I'm not suggesting that for most people, but this is just the way the commissioner runs it. And it's kind of refreshing to not even have to think about claims or anything. It's just like you get up early. It's the first one you check. Oh, cool. These players are available. I'll go get them. And you're done with that league. I can cross it off the list.
That's how I feel about my leagues where I have no money left to bid on players. And you can't, and some leagues have $0 bids. So it's like, I can't bid even if I wanted to. So I just got to wake up, wait for the bids to run. And then I can slide in with my $0 bids because I have no money left.
Yeah. Well, speaking of waivers, we always start off the Thursday show with some guys that were added on waivers this week and kind of posing the question to you guys of if we're starting them in Week 12 or not. Like I've been saying the last couple of weeks, not a ton of awesome options. I mean, again, this has been a really consistent theme this year. But I threw a couple of names in here. One of them at quarterback, Anthony Richardson, who was dropped in a lot of leagues when he was sent to the bench, several weeks ago. He is now back. We saw him rush for 2 touchdowns in Week 11. So Fitz, is Anthony Richardson somebody that if you picked him back up, you are starting again in Week 12?
Probably not. I've got him ranked quarterback 16. Really encouraging return to the starting lineup for Richardson last week. He was accurate and efficient as a passer. It seemed like Shane Steichen had a better game plan for him than he had sort of been giving Richardson earlier in the year. 20 of 30, 272 yards, 1 touchdown and no interceptions. And he delivered the goods as a runner with a pair of touchdown runs. The Lions are such a tough matchup, though. They've allowed the 6th fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. They have the lowest opponent passer rating in the league. They have 14 interceptions and they've only allowed 7 touchdown passes all season. I'd rather not start Richardson despite my overall bullishness on him.
What do you think, Erickson? He's QB 14. in ECR. So he's surrounded by names like CJ Stroud, Drake May right behind him, Jordan Love, Tua right ahead of him. What are you doing with Anthony Richardson this week?
I mean, I have him right there as well, QB 14. I think that if you're in a pinch, if your main quarterback is on a bye week, then I think that he's more than serviceable. But I think that the names ahead of him should be ahead of him. Like if you have Baker Mayfield, you're playing Mayfield. If you have Geno, you're playing Geno. You have Tua. Again, a lot of those other quarterbacks are like in pretty good spots where I don't feel the need to, hey, I got to jam in Richardson because I missed out on last week. Well, it's the same story with Richardson. Like he scored 2 rushing touchdowns last week. And yes, the throwing was there last week. Will it be this week? Who knows? Because I don't think that he just fixes entire mechanics and accuracy in one game. Again, he's going to be up and down. That's kind of what he's always going to be, at least this early in his career. So I think that he obviously has a lot of upside. I would rather play him than Drake May, for example, who hasn't been running as much since he had that concussion. Richardson's going to run. So the optimistic look at Richardson is, hey, yes, the Lions are a tough matchup, but he's going to drop back to throw 45 times if the Colts are giving up a ton of points, and that means rushing opportunities. So I don't think that you need to galaxy brain yourself to like, hey, I got to put him in if you already have a really good option. But Brock Purdy, he's questionable. If he misses, plug in Richardson. I would rather play Richardson than like Love or Stroud, like pocket passers that really haven't been amazing in terms of fantasy football the last couple of weeks and not really rushers. So in that case, that's why I have Richardson at QB 14.
I've got a tight end here too, Will Dissly, who is obviously coming off a very good game, 4 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown in that Sunday night game against Cincinnati. It's his best game of the year. It's only the second time he's been in double-digit scoring in fantasy and half PPR. The other time was back in week 7 when he had 8 catches for 81 yards. No touchdowns there. It was his first touchdown last week. So he is somebody that has gotten a lot of discussion this week, and a lot of people seem to be very excited about. He's ranked inside the top 8 in ECR. He's tight end 7 in our consensus rankings here for half PPR. Again, this was the best game of his season so far. So Fitz, Will Dissly, is he somebody that you're starting against the Ravens on Monday Night Football?
I think so. He's tight end 8. I am a little worried that the Will Dissly enthusiasm is reaching a tipping point. I mean, because let's not totally go overboard here. He is really slow. Like if he ran a 40 today, I'm not sure he could break 5 seconds. He's averaging 9.5 yards per catch, but Dissly has had 4 more receptions in 5 of his last 6 games. His quarterback, Justin Herbert, is on fire, and Dissly does have a really favorable matchup schedule down the stretch, including this week against the Ravens, who are 10th in terms of fantasy points allowed to tight ends. 10th most, that is.
Yeah, Erickson, is this like, if you're excited to play Dissly this week, and I don't know that you are, is it because of the matchup or is it because of what we just saw last week?
Well, I mean, it's more than just last week. I mean, last week he just happened to score a touchdown because it was a good matchup for him. But like Fitz said, it's another great matchup. Well, what did you talk about last week, right? What's the Ravens' weakness and why Russell Wilson wasn't good? Because he doesn't throw the ball over the middle of the field. Where's Will Dissly? In the middle of the field. Yeah. That's where he's seeing all his targets. That's why the Ravens have given up so many points to tight ends this season. And Will Dissly, it's so weird because we're always looking for tight ends that are playing all the snaps, running a route on all the dropbacks. That is not what Will Dissly's doing. But in the 50% of dropbacks that he does run a route, Herbert is throwing him the ball. That's seemingly every single time it's happening. And outside Lad McConkey, who does he trust the most? Like, yes, Quentin Johnston keeps popping off with these touchdowns, but he caught 2 of his 8 passes last week. Like, is that in thrilling confidence with Herbert? Like, I got to keep going back to Johnston because he's not necessarily hauling in all of his targets. Whereas Dissly, he's getting targeted and he's catching it. Like, so, I mean, yeah, I think you got to go back to Dissly.
I think that my single favorite bet of the entire season was the under on Ravens Steelers last week. I tried to tell anybody who would listen that it was insane. The total was as high as it was. Obviously, I was proven correct. I'm not proven correct often, but I was then. I feel almost as strongly about the over in Ravens Chargers, for the record. Like, even at 51, I think that game is going to be an absolute shootout. I know the Chargers defense is good. It's a defense that Lamar tends to do well against. So by that logic, we should be wanting to start a lot of players in that game if we really think it's going to be a shootout. So I am kind of with Fitz in the sense of I'm asking the question in my head of, are we maybe getting a little too enthusiastic about Will Dissly? But having said that, I do think he is a smart start this week, given A, what we saw recently, and B, the matchup. Let's go to our plant our flag players. Fitz, I'll start with you. Who are you planting your flag on in week 12?
You just talked about the shootout potential in Ravens Chargers. How about Quentin Johnston, the big play machine. He is averaging 16.1 yards per catch and has 6 touchdowns in 8 games this season. And, oh, hello, Baltimore Ravens pass defense. They have given up 22 touchdown passes this season, the Ravens have, and they have given up 50 completions of 20 yards or more. They've also given up more passing yards than any team in the league. I know Quentin Johnston is not a heavy target guy, but he should only need 6 or 7 targets to, pop off a few big plays against the porous Ravens defense.
The Chargers haven't played in many shootout, obviously this last week against the Bengals, but prior to that, had they played in many shootouts this season? I feel like anecdotally, I'm not looking at their game log right now, I don't really recall a lot of them. I think it's been a lot of lower scoring games or more one-sided games. So I wonder if this really does play out the way I expect, and it is a very back and forth shootout affair if he does get more volume. I mean, he has his season high in targets last week against the Bengals when they had one of their rare shootouts. So I wonder if we see something similar. And I know he only had 2 catches, but if we see more like 8 or 9 targets this week, Fitz.
Yeah, plus Lad McConkey sort of dinged up his shoulder late in that game last week against the Bengals. I think he's going to be okay and able to play this week, but that's maybe something to watch. If McConkey doesn't play, that certainly would enhance Quentin Johnston's target profile.
Erickson, what do you think about Johnson? He's ranked just inside the top 30 in ECR.
I think that the matchup calls for him to be in your lineup, right? He's a big play specialist, doesn't catch all of his targets, but when he does, he catches them for big plays and touchdowns. And it's the best matchup you could ask for against the Baltimore Ravens. So in a week where there's 6 teams on bye, I feel great throwing Quentin Johnston as my wide receiver 3 flex. He's got a lot of upside. And then we've seen that play out when he's capitalize on some of these downfield targets from him. And he's got Justin Herbert's playing so well. Like again, like you said, Worm, this game's going to shoot out. So play as many Chargers and Ravens as you can.
Yeah. Erickson, what are you doing with your flag player, man? Why do you keep doing this to yourself?
Because I'm going to be right this week. That's why. Because it's fantasy football, dude. Like there are
never wrong, things, just early.
There are certain things with fantasy where, last week, right? It's like, of course, Estime is a total bust because fantasy football, right? MVS does it again, fantasy football. Jaylen Waddle, that's my flag plant this week because, as I said earlier, 6 teams on bye. Are you going to bench Jaylen Waddle if you don't have any other options? I think that he's still a wide receiver 3 this week. You look at the matchup against the New England Patriots. Christian Gonzalez is going to shout out Tyreek Hill. That's what happened the first time that these teams played each other. And what was a result of that? Jaylen Waddle had a season high in targets against the New England Patriots last time they played. He had 8 targets. That was with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. So if there's ever going to be a game where Waddle is more involved, it's going to be against the Patriots. And the reason I think that as well is because, and just talking more about Waddle's role in this offense, well, he hasn't been used a lot because the Dolphins haven't had the need to really attack downfield. The really only time we saw Waddle get increased usage was in that Rams matchup where it looked like he was going to have a monster game. He had a drop pass and then they kind of just got away from him. So the Patriots don't have a pass rush. So there's an opportunity here where Tua can actually hold the ball a little bit longer because there's no pass rush that's getting to him and let these downfield routes develop with Jaylen Waddle being used downfield without Christian Gonzalez on him. We just saw 2 receivers pop off against the Patriots last week between Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. A lot of big downfield plays. So the Patriots, it's a good matchup. 6th in receiving yards allowed per game to wide receivers. So yeah, maybe I'm what's the phrase? Yeah, I'm for misery. I love misery. Things like that. But
misery loves company.
Misery loves company. That's not the right phrase for it. I don't know. But I mean,
you're a masochist.
I'm a masochist. But when people ask me, "Hey, do I play Waddle this week?" I mean, I'm probably going to play him. I know I have him on a lot of teams, and based on my other options, I think that he's still a viable wide receiver 3 play, just because of the matchup.
Fitz, what do you think? What goes through your mind when you see Erickson saying that he's going back to the well with Jaylen Waddle?
That we are Jack and Rose on the Titanic. We're going down with the ship together because I'm pretty much the same way. Hopefully I get to be Rose and stay afloat on the driftwood while Erickson goes under the water. But yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. Like it's a pretty good matchup for Waddle. And I just fundamentally feel like Jaylen Waddle is still a really good player. The guy who was taken 6th overall in the draft, who had 1,000-yard seasons his first 3 years in the league. Like, this guy's a really good player, and I know it hasn't worked out, but I'm going to keep going back to the well.
Yes.
Where do you have him ranked, Fitz?
20, wide receiver 26. He's just behind Devontae Smith and DeAndre Hopkins for me, and just one spot ahead of Quentin Johnston and Tank Dell.
Erickson, did you say where you have him ranked specifically?
Same range. Wide receiver 25. So Fitz is taking Waddle over Johnston. He's taking my flags. Let's see. I was assuming you guys were just going to bash me immediately when I brought out Waddle, but
I can't.
I tried.
The process is there. That's all I'm saying. I can live with this. Okay, if Waddle bombs again, I'm like, hey, I think my process was okay. Like the process.
Yeah, I can also live with you bombing on this again. The NFL season is rolling along and the contenders are separating from the pack. The one thing that hasn't changed this season, DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Fade to the corner of the end zone, running back breaks through the line and gallops 60 yards to score. We don't care how they get them. We just want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings is the best place to do it. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple like a player scoring a touchdown. Go to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. After a terrific Week 11, we've got fewer obvious standout games in Week 12, but you know the NFL always delivers some great games. The late afternoon slate in particular looks strong this week. Cardinals laying a point in Seattle, Green Bay laying a 1.5 at home against the Niners. We wrap up, of course, as we talked about already, with the Harbaugh Bowl as well. Ravens laying a field goal at the Chargers on Monday Night Football. Odds and lines are subject to change on those, but whichever game you bet, here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code FantasyPros. That's code FantasyPros for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets if your bet wins when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. All right, guys, let's get into some player debates. We will start, as always, with the running back position, and we will start with Rico Dowdle versus Isiah Pacheco. This is obviously under the assumption that Pacheco does end up playing this week. It is, earlier on in the week, it kind of seemed like it was trending that direction. We'll see if it ends up panning out that way, but I wanted to get him included in here because I think it's a really interesting question if he's on the field, if you are playing Pacheco versus some of these non-obvious running back guys. So, Erickson, let's start with you. Assuming he's on the field, Isiah Pacheco or Rico Dowdle this week?
I think I'm still going to play Rico Dowdle. I like his volume projection more. I think he also has a really good matchup. I mean, they're playing the Washington Commanders, one of the other worst run defenses in the NFL. Maybe it's not as bad as the Panthers, but I don't feel the need to be a hero with Pacheco. I have no idea what type of workload he's going to get. Obviously, the matchup is so salivating against the Carolina Panthers, but I'm okay just kind of waiting to see if Pacheco is healthy. How many snaps does he play? Does he get goal line work? I don't know. And Dowdle, I feel like I can bank at least 10 points in a full PPR in a good matchup. He gets volume. It's not like Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, any of these guys are going to take away. I know Dowdle didn't play well last week, but it was a tougher matchup against the Texans. So I'm just going to take the points with Dowdle, and I want to wait another week on Pacheco, to be honest.
Fitz, what do you think? When Pacheco's back in the field, do you think it'll be a transition back to a full-time role where they'll kind of ease him into it? Or do you think if he's playing, he's going to be the Pacheco that we were all drafting in like the second or third round?
So my take is pretty similar to Erickson's on this, but give me a second to make a decision. I'm going to talk my way through this before I actually decide because I'm really struggling with this one. The thing is with Dowdle, he's not getting heavy rushing volume, even though he probably should be in this offense that has nothing else going for it. He's only had one game this season with more than 12 carries. He doesn't have a touchdown run all season, doesn't have a run of 20 yards or longer all season, but he is averaging, 4.3 yards per carry, gets it done a little bit as a pass catcher, does have 3 touchdown catches. I do tend to think the Chiefs are going to slow roll the return of Isiah Pacheco. That probably makes the most sense since Kareem Hunt's been doing a nice job. The Chiefs only have one loss. They're playing the Panthers, so this is the softest possible comeback spot for Pacheco. Like, not a bad idea to just get him 5 or 6 or 7 carries and ease him back into action. I think that's what's going to happen. And the crazy thing is, even if he only gets like 6 carries, which is probably what I'm, guessing he's going to get, his projection probably isn't that far below Rico Dowdle's projection. And Dowdle is more or less the feature back for the Cowboys. It's just the matchup is so soft for Pacheco. What if we're wrong about this? And what if the Chiefs hand Kareem Hunt a Starbucks gift certificate and send him on his way? Like, Pacheco, you're back. It's your gig again. That's what I'm worried about, like underestimating that possibility. Like, how mad would you be if you decided to play Rico Dowdle over Isiah Pacheco and they wind up giving Isiah Pacheco 16 carries against the Panthers' run defense? So right now, I've Dowdle ranked like a spot or two higher. I think I might move Pacheco one spot ahead of him. I think I'd play Pacheco here.
It just feels to me, and the main reason why I would maybe lean Pacheco if he's on the field is that the Chiefs are 100% playing for February, not even January, right? Like they don't care about anything this season other than getting this three-peat. They're not going to risk Pacheco if he's not ready. And especially, like you said, against a matchup like the Panthers, like why not just say we're going to win this game with Kareem Hunt if Pacheco's not fully 100%. So if he's on the field, I tend to think this is a smart organization. Like they're only going to put him out there if he's really ready. And if he's really ready, why not let him cook against the Panthers, right? So that's kind of, maybe that'll be proven wrong, but that's kind of the mindset I have with Pacheco is why would they put him out there if he's still going to be limited? So if he's out there, he won't be limited. I mean, again, maybe that's flawed logic.
Can I throw out a quick counter argument to that? Like sure. If the Chiefs thought he might not be really ready, the medical staff wouldn't clear him to play at all and to dress. You know what I mean? Like if he's suited up and out there and active, you have to think the medical staff of the Chiefs has said he is good to go. So
that's what I'm saying. We agree. That's what maybe I said my point poorly because it sounded like I was saying the opposite. But no, that's my point is if he's out there, I'm thinking the medical staff is saying he's good to go.
Yeah.
So I'm totally with you. For the record, are they playing tool on FantasyPros.com has Isiah Pacheco at 82% chance to play. That's based on practice data, and he did limited practice all last week. So just definitely keep an eye on it. But we are currently projecting through our Are They Playing tool that he is going to play this week. Let's go to another running back debate here. Rachaad White versus Tony Pollard. Fitz, I'll start with you on this one.
I'll go with Pollard. Not an easy matchup against the Houston Texans. The Texans' run defense ranks second in DVOA and has allowed the sixth fewest fantasy points to running backs. But Tyjae Spears has a concussion. It seems like he's not going to play this week. He and Pollard had split snaps in week 11. But with Spears, if he is in fact inactive, there's a chance Pollard gets workhorse type usage because I don't think they're going to have him split snaps with Julius Chestnut. White isn't a bad play, but he's sharing snaps with Bucky Irving, and maybe the Tampa offense is a little less RB-centric this week with the return of Mike Evans.
By the way, that tool I just mentioned, Are They Playing tool, Tyjae Spears, 26% chance to play as we projected this week, so not looking likely. Erickson, Pollard, or White this week? I
think you got to take Pollard. I mean, he's going to see an 80% plus snap share because Spears isn't going to play with his concussion. So I think you just got to take the snaps, the touches with a Tony Pollard versus White, who has been on a hot streak with touchdowns. If he doesn't score, then you're kind of concerned about, well, Bucky's the better rusher of the two, and we're not exactly sure what's going to shake out with that backfield. So I will agree with Fitz and go with Tony Pollard as well.
Do you see these guys as close, or do you think there's like a pretty decent gap between Pollard and White?
I mean, I think that it's close in terms of, well, White has a better matchup. So I could get that aspect of it. But in terms of just like raw projection and volume, I mean, Pollard is the clear winner. So that's why I think that when in doubt, going with the guy that's going to see potentially 20 touches versus the guy that might see 10, I mean, you're going to be better off going with the guy with a 20 plus workload.
Yeah. Let's do some wide receivers here. This is an interesting one. A couple of guys who were former teammates. Marvin Harrison Jr. versus Jaxon, Smith-Njigba. Erickson, do you have a preference for a former Buckeye this week?
I mean, I think you should probably start both of them. I don't think that either should be on your bench. I think I have them both inside the top 20. So I think both are really good plays. If you're making me pick one, because that's what you have to do here on the show.
I think based on where they were drafted, there's a chance people will have to make this decision in smaller leagues where if they took JSN later and they have a strong, wide receiver group at the top that you could have to make. I agree that they're both strong starts. I think we all are on the same page about that. But if you have to pick, because sometimes people do have to pick between two good players.
Yeah, 10 team league where you're only required to start two receivers. This could well be a dilemma people are facing.
Feel so bad for those people. But if I'm in that situation, meanwhile, I'm stuck here playing Jaylen Waddle again for another week. Great. So for me, I'm going to go with Marvin Harrison Jr. I mean, he was my buy on all the trade shows before their bye week. I think that he has been starting to heat up. You have rookies coming off the bye week to get more involved. So I'm excited about Marvin Harrison Jr. You look at the Seahawks, a good matchup, third most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers this season. And when you look at how Seattle deploys their defense, a lot of press coverage, and that's where Marvin Harrison has been really good against press coverage this year. So I like Marvin Harrison to kind of have this is going to be the start of his kind of second half breakout here against the Seahawks. I love this game overall. I think that this game is going to be a shootout between the Seahawks and the Cardinals. So I think you're going to see points from both sides. So similar to that Ravens-Chargers game, I want to start as many Cardinals and Seahawks as I can.
You joke, Fitz, but like half the questions I get from friends and family members like are in more casual leagues, and they're like, yeah, it's like 2 receivers. Half of them don't even have a flex, like small league. Like I roll my eyes at some. I mean, not to look down. I mean, anybody can play whatever league they want. But some of these, I'm like, there's such good players on your bench. Or
it's almost harder that way. It's like every week I got to decide between Chase and Jefferson, and it's awful.
Yeah, I mean, yes. My cousin is in a league. It's a 8-team league. No flexes. So she starts 2 running backs, 2 receivers. That's it. And I'm like, this is painful to help answer her questions every week.
I would bet my left leg that there's someone in a league in Columbus, Ohio, who is facing this dilemma.
Yes, they've got Olave on IR. They're trying to pick between JSN and Harrison.
Do I start CJ Stroud again? What do I do?
Yeah, they've got their dynasty shares gearing up for Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Yeah. Fitz, but between these two guys, who would you take as a Buckeye hater, Marvin Harrison Jr. or Jaxon Smith?
Excuse me, I have a child at Ohio State right now, so I cannot be a Buckeye hater. So Marvin Harrison has not had more than 7 targets in any game since week 3, and he's playing a much different role than I expected him to play. I thought he was going to be this alpha receiver for the Cardinals. He's been more of a vertical threat. His average depth of target is 14 yards, averaging 15.1 yards per catch. I like the big play potential you get with these deeper targets downfield. It just means, though, that there's kind of a lower floor when he's not getting all that many targets per game. So give me Jaxon Smith-Njigba. And Erickson was just talking about like wanting to see the second half breakout from Marvin Harrison Jr. We're getting a second half breakout from Jaxon Smith-Njigba, second year breakout also. I mean, we wanted to see what he could do with DK Metcalf in the lineup, because 2 weeks ago, Jaxon Smith-Njigba had this epic game against the Rams, 7 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. But DK was out that game. DK comes back last week. JSN draws 11 targets, catches 10 of them, and has 110 yards. He just looks really good lately. So I feel like he's turned the corner. I would rather have him than Harrison. I think he offers the safer floor, the much safer floor, and I think he might offer just as high a ceiling.
Do you agree, though, Fitz, that these guys are both inside the top?
Yes.
20, 24? What is the number that they're both
inside?
I
mean, I've got JSN inside the top 20. I have him at, I believe, wide receiver 19. Yes, indeed, wide receiver 19, and I have Marvin Harrison, wide receiver 23. So it's close.
Yeah. All right, another wide receiver debate here. Christian Watson versus Xavier Worthy, a couple of big players. Xavier Worthy just, it's been all over the place this year, mostly on the downside of the roller coaster rather than the upside. He did have 68 total yards in last week's game, first double-digit scoring game since week 8, 61 yards and a touchdown. He also had 1 rushing attempt. So, Fitz, I'll start with you this time. Worthy or Christian Watson coming off of his big performance?
Yeah, two guys who've cost their fantasy stakeholders some hair follicles this year, probably. So I'm just a big believer in Watson and his big play capability. I mean, a dude who's 6'4", has sub 4.4 speed, as we saw last week. Like just special ball skills for this dude. Like he can go up and get it. He can make spectacular diving catches like he did last week. You just have to be willing to live with the risk, because Watson has not been getting the sort of target counts that we'd like to see. Even if we exclude the game against the Vikings earlier this year where he got hurt early and played only 9 snaps, take that game out and he's still averaging only 4.3 targets. But it's kind of the same thing for Worthy, too. He's averaging 4.8 targets a game, and his target competition has gotten stiffer with the acquisition of DeAndre Hopkins. Juju Smith is healthy. Juju Smith-Schuster is healthy again. So similar boom-bust profiles here. I think Watson ranks slightly higher in his team's target pecking order than Worthy does in his.
Erickson, what do you think?
I think Watson is among receivers you can trust, I think you can definitely trust Watson a little bit more. You look at the last 3 games that they played, Watson leads the Packers in targets, air yards, catches, and receiving yards. So it's funny, last week he was my touchdown call, and he should have been my flag plant because he didn't score a touchdown, but he had a really good game. So I was excited about Watson last week. He obviously came through, even on pretty limited volume. Only had, I believe, 4 targets, caught all of them for a career high in receiving yards. So he's been efficient. He's starting to heat up. So definitely Watson for me. I think it's a fun stat. This is from Tom Strachan about Xavier Worthy. So there's only 2 receivers that have more touchdowns than he does this year. And it's Chase and Amon-Ra St. Brown because he has 6. So I'm assuming that there's a bunch of receivers that also have 6 touchdowns, but it's just a very unusual rookie year for Xavier Worthy, who in his first game, if we think back to week 1, he scored 2 touchdowns. He actually could have scored 3 touchdowns in that first game for the Kansas City Chiefs. So I am already gearing up for the offseason debate about Xavier Worthy. Can't wait.
I did not realize that stat. That's a great one. Obviously, 2 of those touchdowns came rushing, not receiving, but still, that's
very, very unusual rookie season for Worthy. But for this debate, definitely Watson for me. They're
in this range. They're back to back in ECR, by the way. Watson and Worthy at wide receiver 35 and 36. You could throw in like at wide receiver 34, Roma Dunze. Jaylen Waddle's in that range. Like it's a lot of guys who there's real reasons for question marks and also real reasons you could kind of build the case for them. So it's a tough kind of range to pick a guy. Guys, low testosterone affects about 30% of adult men in America. Are you feeling the drag of fatigue, noticing a dip in muscle mass, or sensing a slump in libido? If so, it's time to get your testosterone levels tested. If you have low T, Kizotrex is an FDA-approved pill that's changing the game in testosterone replacement therapy. In fact, Kizotrex restored testosterone levels in nearly 9 out of 10 clinical study participants, and its unique formulation bypasses the liver to avoid liver damage. It's time to break free from injections, pellets, and gels. Choose Kizotrex and take a step toward being the hero of your life again. To see if you qualify, visit Kizotrex.com and take the low T quiz today. That's KYZATREX.com. By prescription only, Kizotrex is a controlled substance and can be a target of abuse. Kizotrex is not for use in pregnant women or men with prostate or breast cancer. Safety and efficacy in those younger than 18 is not known. Tell your doctor about all medical conditions and medications. Serious side effects could include increased blood pressure, worsening prostate symptoms, increased risk of prostate cancer, blood clots in the legs or lungs, decreased sperm count, liver problems, enlarged or painful breasts, and breathing problems while you sleep. Common side effects include swelling of the ankles, feet, or body, increased red blood cell count, and increase in prostate-specific antigen or PSA levels. PSA is a test used to detect prostate cancer. Report these symptoms to your doctor. Call your doctor to learn more about Kizotrex. For questions or more information, visit www.kizotrex.com or call 1-833-949-5040. All right, let's do the more rapid-fire start-sit decisions, fellas. Running back, Gus Edwards or Audric Estime. Not quite as exciting as some of these other debates we've had in terms of how interested we are in these players. Erickson, I'll start with you. Edwards or Estime?
It's Estime, obviously. I'm going back to Estime because fantasy football, right? This is just how this works, right? The 1 week where we're all excited about Estime, he bombs, and the next week we all bench him, he gets cut, he's going to go off. Like, that's just how this stuff works. So again, Gus Edwards, he had 6 carries last week. So did Estime, except Estime also had targets. So in this particular debate, I actually thought Edwards might actually have better touchdown odds than Estime, but I actually looked at the betting sites and it's actually Estime that has better touchdown odds. So he's got a better matchup. Edwards is touchdown or bust, but it seems like Estime, again, if the Broncos are up big, you could see him getting some work in the fourth quarter, maybe finds the end zone. So yeah, I'm going to, when it's at least specific against Edwards, I'll go back to Estime. I'll roll the dice again. Let's go.
I mean, I think the case is if you were to say, hey, one of these guys is getting 14 touches this week, it would be less surprising for that to be Estime than it would to be Edwards, just because of the way the Broncos, like, they could kind of spin the wheel and pick a different player each week as opposed to Edwards.
That's the expectation with Denver. They just pick a random guy.
Fitz, what do you think about this head-to-head matchup? But then also, do you think the Chargers are the type of team to go into this game saying we want to get both Dobbins and Gus touchdowns against their former team, or do they strike you as a team that is going to be less interested in that?
Yeah, I mean, good luck with that. Like, because the Ravens' run defense is hellish, and that's the reason I'm taking Estime here. Like, I'm not sure I agree with your assessment about the touch outlook, Worm. Like, I think it's pretty similar for these guys. But yeah, the difference is that Gus has this hellish matchup against this run D, and he's only got that one path. He doesn't catch passes. So one path to fantasy value, and that path runs into a brick wall, basically. So with Estime, look, Sean Payton totally swerved us 2 weeks ago when Estime outcarried Javonte Williams 14-1, and we thought he was the new early down back for the Broncos. And then last week, not the case. Javonte outsnapped Estime 32-14, outcarried him 9-6. The roles are still pretty ambiguous in the Denver backfield right now, but I will take the ambiguity in the good matchup against the Ravens rather than this really bad matchup against, the Raiders. Good matchup against the Raiders, bad matchup against the Ravens. Give me the guy in the better matchup.
How about a receiver here, Fitz? I'll start with you this time. DJ Moore or Jakobi Meyers?
Oh, man. It's really close. DJ Moore had 7 catches for 62 yards last week, but in Thomas Brown's first game as the Bears' interim offensive coordinator, he totally put the training wheels on Caleb Williams. It was all quick drops, quick releases, nothing downfield that game. I mean, nothing. I'm not sure if Caleb Williams had a ball within air yards. I'm not sure he threw a pass that traveled 15 or more air yards last week. It was that buttoned up as far as the passing game for the Bears. I just worry that DJ Moore doesn't have much of a ceiling with the lack of verticality in this offense, even though he's really good after the catch. But I will still take him over Jakobi Meyers because, you have to figure that Patrick Surtain Jr. is going to shadow Meyers, right? Who else is he going to shadow in the Raiders passing game? Brock Bowers, maybe? It just seems like Meyers is going to see a lot of Surtain, and that's obviously a scary matchup with Gardner Minshew as your quarterback.
Erickson, what do you think?
I'm going with Jakobi Meyers. I want no part of this Bears offense against the Minnesota Vikings. You talk about how the game plan changed with Thomas Brown calling the plays. The number one defense against quick passes is the Vikings this season. They're going to, these bubble screens to DJ Moore, it's not going to work. They're going to get picked off. So I am very concerned about DJ Moore. I don't think there's a ceiling with him. And I think that we're going to see this Bears offense revert to what it was before, where you can't really start any of these Bears wide receivers. So I hate this matchup. And yes, the matchup for Jakobi Meyers, obviously not great, but he was in this matchup earlier this year. 6 catches, 72 yards. I'll take it. Just give me Jakobi Meyers.
Let's do some flex debates here. Chuba Hubbard with Jonathan Brooks coming back this week, or Ladd McConkey in this game we've talked about as a shootout. Erickson, who do you prefer, Hubbard or McConkey?
McConkey for me. Again, Ravens, Chargers, number one receiver on the Chargers. Give me Ladd.
Fitz?
Yeah, Ladd. Great matchup against the Ravens, and Ladd has been terrific lately. 87.5 receiving yards over his last 4 games. He's averaging 18.4 yards per catch over that stretch, and you thought of him as the short area receiver, but he's connecting on some big plays. Justin Herbert is just totally clicking with his receivers right now. Hubbard has to go against the Chiefs run defense that ranks number 1 in DVOA and is giving up 52.2 yards per game rushing to running back. So, guy in a great matchup versus a guy in a terrible matchup. I'll take Ladd.
So we're all agreeing across the board that they're back-to-back in ECR and flex, which is why I included them, because I thought that was off as well. I think Ladd is the very clear play over Chuba Hubbard this week. So we are definitely all hand-holding there. How about Bucky Irving versus Courtland Sutton? Fitz, what do you think about that one, Irving or Sutton?
Sutton, red hot lately. Over his last 4 games, he has averaged 9.5 targets, 7 catches, 92.5 receiving yards. And the matchup with the Raiders is by no means a scary one. Bucky Irving, again, that split backfield. And, maybe we see Tampa Bay use lean on the backs a little less heavily than they have recently now that Mike Evans is back.
Erickson, Irving, or Sutton?
I still like Bucky Irving here. I just think the Giants' run defense they've just been horrible all season long. And if they're playing with positive game script, Bucky has just looked so good, so explosive. I think that they could lean on him a decent amount here. Yes, Mike Evans is back, but I still think that Bucky has the vice grip on the lead rushing role in the Buccaneers backfield. So Sutton, yes, again, another player that I think that you're probably starting in most lineups, but I believe when he played the Raiders last time, I don't think he really had like a decent like game. Like he wasn't that effective. So again, if you see the Raiders potentially, you see the Broncos run the ball a little bit more. I mean, yeah, against the Raiders, he had 2 catches for 32 yards. So do I expect that to happen again? No, because Bo Nix is playing obviously much better, but that's still in his range of outcomes. Again, I feel confident when it's a running back I like, a receiver I like. I feel more confident about Bucky getting more volume overall than Sutton. So I think it's close, but I'll go with Bucky.
It was his third worst game of the season. Yeah.
Don't doubt for a minute that this decision has been influenced by all the Courtland Sutton scar tissue Erickson has.
Well, Erickson clearly doesn't mind going back to the well, and these botches he has, less evidenced by Jaylen Waddle. So he's happy.
I'm going to be watching that game, and every time Waddle does, every time he's on the field, I'm just going to be like, throw him the ball. Come on.
Yeah, and I tend to lean towards Sutton. Just like he's just giving you such a floor the last several weeks. He hit that one, goose egg in week 7, but outside of that, the other 5 most recent games for him, he's been double digits and has been getting 8+ targets in most of those games. So I kind of lean with Fitz there. How about Austin Ekeler or Calvin Ridley? Erickson, who do you like here?
Same thing for me here. Again, Ridley and Sutton have kind of been similar in usage, similar in targets, kind of guys that have improved over the last month plus of games. I just can't say no to running backs against Dallas. Like I can't in my being, especially with Ekeler, how involved he is in the passing game. Besides Terry McLaurin, the Commanders, and I guess Zach Ertz, I mean, Ekeler is a big part of what they do in the passing game. So he catches passes. He's going to be efficient against this Dallas run defense that is absolutely horrible. So I think Brian Robinson, Ekeler, both of these guys, I think are going to eat a decent amount. So I'm going to go with Ekeler. And Ridley does scare me just a little bit because if he doesn't like connect on that big one play, Houston has one of the best pass rushes in the NFL. And with Will Levis, that can be a cause for concern. If he doesn't get that giant play downfield, if they don't connect on it, then I feel like Ridley's going to be underwhelming. Whereas Ekeler, I feel safe about his floor and just such a great matchup.
What do you think, Fitz? Ridley
for me. Over the last 5 weeks, wide receiver 13 in PPR fantasy points per game, and he's averaging almost 10 yards, 10 targets per game over that stretch. I certainly don't mind Ekeler. As Erickson mentioned, the matchup against the Cowboys is a really good one. Ekeler, obviously a pass catching threat, and the Cowboys have allowed the 6th most receiving yards to running backs. I just never know what Ekeler's touch counts are going to look like. And that kind of concerns me. He's had 7 or fewer carries in 6 of his 10 games this year. And 8 catches last week, great. That was the first time he's had more than 4 catches in a game this year. And yeah, of course, you can live with 4 catches for a running back, but maybe the pass catching ceiling isn't quite as high as it seems for Austin Ekeler. So I prefer the Titans alpha receiver here.
One more flex, Javonte Williams or Josh Downs, Erickson?
Don't trust the Broncos backfield. Just when you feel like it's okay to get back in the Javonte Williams pool, there's going to be sharks in that pool. So I get it's a good matchup, but I'm afraid. And when I look at Josh Downs, he is clearly the guy that Anthony Richardson leads on the most. They have the best chemistry whenever Richardson's dropping back to throw. And the Lions are one of the worst defenses of the NFL against slot receivers. I've been targeting slot receivers against them all season long, and that's where Downs is. That's his bread and butter, is from the slot. So going back to Richardson as a start or sit this week, he's going to see a lot of dropbacks. He's going to have a decent amount of passing attempts. So even if only half of his pass attempts are accurate, I think Downs is going to see double-digit targets in this matchup that is favorable for him. So I just don't feel confident going back to Javonte even after we saw last week, because we've done this song and dance multiple times this year where, oh, he's fighting the Panthers this week. This is great. And then he is horrible after a good game. So I'm just going to go back to Josh Downs because I just feel more confident about him in this matchup versus Javonte, even though it is against the Raiders.
Fitz, you've been the guy fading Josh Downs for most of the season. Are you doing that again here, or is the uncertainty in the Broncos backfield just too much and you're going to stick with Downs?
I mean, I have him ranked in starter range. Maybe I don't have him ranked as high as I thought. Wide receiver 29. So I do still have trust issues with the Colts pass catchers with Anthony Richardson. I know it worked out well last week. Downs had 5 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Richardson completed 20 passes. But in Richardson's other starts, he's averaged like 11 completions. And that's a problem with, Michael Pittman back, Alec Pierce, Adonai Mitchell is starting to come on a little bit. So if you're chopping up only about a dozen completions between 4 guys, that's kind of a problem. I don't know. I mean, Javonte seems like he's back to being the lead guy in the Denver backfield. And the matchup against the Raiders is good. Javonte's already faced them. And in week 5, he had 111 yards from scrimmage, including a season high 50 receiving yards. The Raiders have allowed the 6th most fantasy points to running backs. So I'm going to go with Javonte here. I think he's safer.
But a quarterback here, a couple players that are definitely both ranked in starting range, but I think it's entirely possible. There are teams out there with both of them, and we are ranking them both highly. Kyler Murray versus Bo Nix, who is coming off his best passing game, but really his best game overall of his young career. Kyler also coming off of a strong game, prior to the bye he had last week. Fitz, I'll start with you this time. Kyler or Bo Nix in week 12?
Bo Nix. The dude just keeps putting up fantasy points, and I think he does it more consistently than Kyler Murray. Since week 5, Nix has averaged 21.6 fantasy points per game, and not a lot of floor games with Bo Nix. Like, the floor has been pretty high for him. Kyler, on the other hand, he's had 3 games with 25 or more fantasy points this year, but he's also had games where he scored 10 points, 12 points, and 4.8 points. So I think you get a little more safety with Bo Nix.
Erickson?
I have him ranked back to back. So, I mean, I think you could really start either guy, but I like Kyler because I just think this game has a more likely chance of shooting out. I don't envision Broncos Raiders being a shootout game. Where Kyler, how do you unlock his ceiling where he finishes top 5 or even QB1 overall? It's when he's running around, when they're playing from behind, and I think the Seahawks are going to score points on the Cardinals. So for that reason, I just slightly lean towards Kyler Murray, but I think that Fitz makes his 2-point where Nix definitely comes with the safer floor, because Kyler, we've seen where he has games where he's QB5 and then we have games where he's QB25 because they just decide to run the ball 100 times James Conner and then he doesn't do anything. Yeah. So I think that depending on what you need this week, again, if you have a lot of guys on bye week, maybe you shoot for the ceiling a little bit more with Kyler Murray. But if you feel, hey, my lineup started really good, I don't want to risk it, then I understand the play on Bo.
Tight end here, Jonnu Smith or TJ Hawkinson? Erickson?
Jonnu Smith for me. I mean, he's the reason why Jaylen Waddle has been horrible this year. He's the second receiver on the Miami Dolphins. And I can't say it's fluky because, I mean, last week he had the fluky touchdown where he was wide open, but his usage is off the charts, right? Like, he is running a route on a ton, 80% or more of the Tua Tagovailoa dropbacks. So it's not really random that he's having this, breakout this season because he's just so heavily involved in the offense. Like, they're getting him the ball in space. They're using him yards after the catch. So he also, again, pointed out how Waddle had a lot of targets against the Patriots. So did Jonnu Smith. Like, Jonnu Smith still had a decent game, even with Waddle more involved in that Patriots matchup. And then Hawkinson, he had good usage against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but then last week his routes were down and they're starting to use some of these other tight ends, Johnny Munt, Josh Oliver. So Hawkinson, I'm not nearly as confident about. And when I look at Bears Vikings, that's a game that I think is just going to go through the mud. It's a game I don't think you're going to see a lot of points. It's gross. Every Bears home game is gross. So I'm going to go with Jonnu Smith. Fitz?
I'll totally piggyback on Erickson here and just to expand on the usage point that Erickson made with Hawkinson. They're kind of slow rolling his return from this catastrophic injury that he suffered less than a calendar year ago. His snap share has been between 45% and 48% in his first 3 games back. So obviously, like, they have a management plan for Hawkinson. And, since Hawkinson's return, Vikings tight end Josh Oliver, tight end 14 in half-point PPR fantasy scoring. Hawkinson is tight end 23. So, yeah, they have been using other tight ends. And, of course, they've got Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. Jonnu Smith, I mean, we've seen Otten mania in Tampa Bay. Everyone's all excited about Will Dissly now. Jonnu has quietly averaged 6 catches and 79 yards per game since week 5. Like, he has turned into a stud tight end. I'm taking Jonnu in this matchup, not even close.
I think it has been quieter. I think that's a great point by you, Fitz, is like all I hear about is guys like Otten and Dissly kind of coming out of nowhere. And I don't feel like up until this last, I mean, obviously he had the huge game, just a week ago, but up until that, I don't feel like I had heard as much discussion about Jonnu's role in this offense.
Well, Worm, I would be happy to discuss why Jonnu was a big reason why my opponent in the Scott Fish Bowl last week scored 200 points and got avalanched by 50. Jonnu,
yeah.
I had Jonnu and Brock. That's like a tight end super premium league. I've got Brock Bowers and Jonnu Smith.
Nice.
It was a pretty good week for those guys.
I was looking at the playoffs for Scott Fishbowl, and I think you are the highest ranked Fantasy Pros representative, unless I missaw that. So congrats on your. I think most a lot of Fantasy Pros folks are in the playoffs.
You're top 500, right?
Yeah. I'm in that range. Yeah, I'm not like near the very top, but I'm in like the top 500 or so. But you are absolutely crushing it this year. Brock Bowers, I'm sure, has gone a long way towards that.
Indeed.
Truthfully. Did you know that feeding your lawn regularly builds a stronger, more resilient lawn that naturally crowds out weeds? Scott's Turf Builder products provide year-round feeding with essential seasonal solutions for your lawn. Scott's has a subscription plan that makes caring for your lawn easier than ever. They put their expertise to work by analyzing the location, size, and condition of your lawn to create a custom plan for your yard, and they'll ship you the right product to apply at the perfect time. By answering only a few short questions about your lawn, Scott's experts will craft the program that's right for you and your yard. Visit scotts.com to learn more. Feed your lawn, feed it. Guys, let's wrap up with the touchdown calls contest. Fitz, you're on running back this week.
Welcome back, Isiah Pacheco. What better way to celebrate his return than with a touchdown against a Carolina defense that has given up 17 touchdown runs this season? Not sure what the workload is going to be, but whether it's 6 or 16 carries, one of them is going to finish in the end zone against the Panthers.
I am on receiver. I'm going Marvin Harrison Jr. I haven't picked a lot of big names. I've tried to kind of go, guys maybe that are a little more dark horse candidates here. But I like Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously the player, and I think this is going to be a shootout, so I wanted to pick a player in this game, maybe a less obvious one than one of the guys on the Seattle side, so I went with Harrison. So we've got Isiah Pacheco at running back, Marvin Harrison Jr. at receiver. Erickson, who's your tight end?
Will Dissly caught a touchdown last week, and I think that he makes it 2 weeks in a row in a good matchup against the Ravens in a game. Yeah, we want points, we want shootouts. This is where touchdowns come from, so going back to Will Dissly, Monday night. Let's go.
Say goodbye to start-sit dilemmas with Fantasy Pros Start-Sit Assistant. Within seconds, you'll know exactly who to play for optimal results each and every week. Leveraging insights from numerous experts, the Start-Sit Assistant aligns your lineup decisions with the top minds in fantasy football, giving you a competitive edge. Maximize your lineup's potential with just a few clicks. Head to fantasypros.com/myplaybook and make winning decisions in no time. We will wrap up there. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Best of luck with your start-sit decisions in Week 12. For Erickson and Fitz, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you again next time.